N by Planet Reddit. Serious, people who have survived a murder attempt by dumb luck. What's your story? Thank God for my nosy neighbors. I always used to hate how nosy they were. Until this happened. When I was about 10, I was riding my bike outside. My parents always let me ride my bike outside during the summer, but only up and down the street we were on. One day, a man in a van was parked across the street. He called to me, asking me if I had seen his dog and could help him find it. Me, being a dumb child, offered to help him find it, and I started walking towards his van. My neighbor, an older white lady, came bolting out of her house hooting and yelling, telling the guy to back off. The dude got back in his car in a hurry and took off. And it wasn't until many years later that I realized how bad that situation could have been. Did you tell your parents? How did they react? I didn't want to tell my parents, but my neighbor walked me home and made sure to tell my mother. She didn't let me go outside for what felt like the whole summer. There was a bit of yelling and hugging too, none of which I understood at the time. Now that I'm older, I completely understand my mother's reaction. When I was about 10, my grandfather was dying from complications of his heart issues and mental deterioration. I didn't know him very well, as the last time we had been in contact him was when I was a baby. My father never liked him and didn't bother coming with me and my mother to visit him in the hospital. But when we got there, he was resting peacefully and my mother went forward and whispered some words to him. I imagine about his current state of health. I hang back a little bit because the creepy old guy whom I didn't recall seeing in my whole life really freaked me out. Regardless of my anxiety, my mom said I should approach grandpa and share some nice words with him. I understood by how sad my mother was that I shouldn't argue too much, so I approached his hospital bed to speak to him. He didn't seem conscious at all, so I just did what my mother did, leaning forward and just whisper some nice things to him. Things took turn when mid-sentence his eyes flare open and he stares at me, making me stop what I'm saying. My heart dropped into my ass when he looked at me because it was pure hatred in his eyes. As soon as we made eye contact, he bolted upright from his bed and wrapped his hands around my neck and started throttling me as hard as he could. I barely even remember what happened, but my mom was screaming for a nurse. And grandpa kept yelling at me while shaking my neck violently, FCKING betrayal, you betray me. And then he died. Almost as fast as it began, it was over. His grip loosened and he flatlined. My mother was inconsolable and I was extremely confused and crying out of sheer trauma at the situation. I guess I look a little too much like my dad. My dad has a client that owns a number of fast food restaurants. One day we were working at one of his stores, remodeling, and talking about robberies. The client told us that when he was just getting into the fast food business, he lived in Colorado. He was assistant manager at a chain that required him to wear a tie. A drug addict came into the restaurant to rob him and grabbed him from behind, putting a knife to his throat. He opened the register and the guy attempted to slit his throat anyway, except the knife was dull and couldn't cut through the material of the tie. The client began to fight back and escaped with minor injuries. Addict went to prison and apparently he has the tie in a frame at home. Imagine being so entitled that not being allowed into a club warrants murdering someone. My friend got killed because of someone like that. He was a photographer working a house show party. Two guys either got kicked out or weren't allowed in. The two guys proceed to do a drive-by shooting later that night and John just happened to get hit and killed by their random shooting. Duck those a-holes. He was a good dude. Throwaway because it got some media. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I was representing this guy that had embezzled almost $500K from his business partner. He was looking down the barrel at several years in prison. A bunch of his assets had been seized by the government, was being sued by multiple creditors for north of $2 million, and was in the midst of an ugly divorce and wasn't allowed to see his kids. I was one of 3 lawyers he had: criminal, civil and divorce. He was drinking a lot and using coke. I used to get this incoherent phone calls in the middle of the night that ranged from threats to crying. He came to my office one day and asked for me, but I was in court. My secretary said he was perfectly civil. He then went to his divorce lawyer's office and shot him to death. Got stopped by the police a short distance away and was wounded in a shootout. He would later tell the cops that he had come to my office to shoot me that day and also planned to shoot his civil attorney. Why? You were presumably hired on to defend him, so why did he even do that? So confusing. He was not in a rational state of mind. People sometimes have a tendency to blame their lawyers when the situation isn't going to get resolved how they like. I know 2 other attorneys who have been assaulted or threatened with weapons by clients. I have a friend who had a party at his parents' house when he was in high school that a ton of random people went to. He got super drunk during the party and went upstairs to go to sleep, knowing that his friends would watch the party for him. My friend woke up from his nap to a guy from his school sitting on top of him stabbing him to death. He was stabbed 7 times before it stopped and he laid there on the bed dying. The only reason he is still alive is because his best friend came upstairs to ask him if it was alright if he made a frozen pizza and found him. The assailant was put in jail and recently was released, and it scares me to know that a guy who wanted to know what it would feel like to kill someone, said during the trial, is still out there free. There's a guy in my hometown named Bamboo Flute Blanchard, I am not joking, who stabbed his father for the same reason. His family is kind of locally famous. They're a weird, large, hippie family. Anyway, news article said he told his brother he wanted to know what it would feel like to kill someone. Picked up the knife and just waked on over and stabbed his dad. Also failed. Also made it out of jail pretty quickly, again weird family. Father wouldn't even speak to the police about it. And the young man has been in and out of jail psych wards ever since on various low level and drug, acid, related stuff. Our neighbors when I was growing up had 3 kids the same ages as myself and my siblings. We were all friends and got along well for the most part. Their eldest child, I'll call him Peter, has Asperger's syndrome and was known to have outbursts that would sometimes be violent. One day, when I was 5 or 6, our mothers decided to take all 6 of us to a nearby wading pool because it was hot out. Well, due to that, it was pretty busy. And there were a lot of other kids. There were 2 lifeguards there, but were generally too busy chatting with each other to be doing their jobs, as my mother later tells me. I was off with my neighbor's daughter, was my age, and Peter. I don't remember why, but he suddenly flew into a fit and decided that I was at fault for something. He, being about 8 and a lot bigger than me, grabs my head and holds it under the water. I remember that. I remember not being able to breathe. I remember clearly thinking that I needed air or I was going to die. I remember fighting, but not being strong enough to get him off of me. Then I remember my mom's face. She had a clear look of both terror and fury. I remember looking over and seeing Peter sitting with his arms around his knees, rocking back and forth as his mother tried to calm him down. Then I remember my mom absolutely losing it on the lifeguards who had missed everything and were clueless as to why this tiny woman was screaming at them that her daughter had almost drowned on their watch. To this day, I have a fear of swimming and absolutely do not like having water on my face, even when I'm showering. I jumped out of a moving vehicle. This was in college in a different country. There were commuter buses that takes us to and from the campus and dorms. I had to stay 30 minutes later for a project, so around 7:30 PM by then the commuter rush was gone. I was the only passenger and I was sitting at front next to the driver. He was acting already shady. It was dark and rainy. He made a sudden dock turn of the grassy unlit hill. He said something's wrong with the tires. I said I'm getting off. He won't let me. The hill leads to a cliffside where rapes and murders have happened before. I had the pointy stick of my umbrella facing him ready to jab if he tried anything, which he tried to reach grab for me. I jumped and ran straight to the highway where another commuter bus stopped, surprised seeing a girl coming out of the tall grasses. I saw the driver of my previous ride speeding away. Nothing was wrong with his tires. I was abducted at a gas station during undergrad. The locks on my car were broken, and as soon as I got back in, a strange man came in and forced me to drive him to an ATM. I am paralyzed with fear, so any sense or reason I had went out the window. He claimed he worked at Wendy's and for my generosity he would give me all the Wendy's I ever wanted. On the way to the ATM he showed me pictures of his daughters on his clearly stolen cell phone. Then a Whitney Houston song came on the radio and he starts bawling his eyes out and screaming, why do all the good people have to die? Only bad things should happen to bad people. I go to the ATM. Take out cash. Give it to him thinking it's over. He then makes me get back in the car and drive him somewhere else. We pass by some train tracks and I'm thinking this is it. This is where I will be murdered. He asks me what I'm studying in school. And I tell him biochemistry. I believe in jet propulsion and all that shit. We are not alone, aliens are among us. He then makes me pull over at a gas station and he tells me drive away sweetheart. I call the cops. Had to do a lineup. Apparently this dude had done this to a ton of other women. And some were less unscathed than I was. I like that his best means of persuasion is ducking free Wendy's. Mine's not extreme by any chance, but a couple of years ago my brother and I went to walk the dog at like 11 PM. We left through the side gate, live on a corner, and right as we exit I see this weird looking dude at the corner of the footpath walking weirdly towards us. Got bad vibes and told my brother to get the dog and get back inside. This dude is walking kind of side on and hiding something in his hand behind his back. As I'm getting my brother through the gate, the dude says something like, oh hi mate, can I come in? I need a blanket, I'm freezing. I just ignored him and went inside and locked the door. We then get a call from the people who live 2 doors up. The same dude knocked on their door and their 10-year-old son opened it to see the dude holding a ducking hatchet. Anyway, I'm glad I went with my gut on that one. I don't know why, but when attackers use a hatchet the story feels 10 times scarier. Because it's not a normal thing for anyone to carry. My supposed best friend decided that my wife and I were too perfect. Therefore it must all be an act and I was obviously abusing her. He was at our house after I made an awesome dinner and we were having fun drinking and singing karaoke. I went to the kitchen to put some glasses away. Came back and leaned on the couch with him slightly behind me to the left of me. Then I heard a thunk and felt an amazing amount of pain on the top of my head. He had picked up the whiskey bottle on the table and smashed it into my skull. I was very confused as to WTF was happening. Then the blood started pouring. I didn't want to get blood everywhere, so I went to the kitchen. Dude is pacing back and forth saying weird shit. I thought about my gun, which was close by, but I wasn't thinking quite straight. He left. I had a huge concussion and still suffer side effects from it. My number 2 goal in life is to live longer than that Ashad just so I can shit on his grave. What happened with him? Is he in jail? Absolutely nothing. The legal system let me down big time. They called him and asked what happened and that was all. They wouldn't even grant me a restraining order. I, 18F back then, now 25, was on my way home at night after meeting a friend. My home was just 10 minutes away from the train station. After a few minutes I felt someone following me. No big deal, I toughed. Just someone else walking home. But I started walking faster. I realized the person behind me was catching up. Weird. In my head I started to make up scenarios of how to defend myself if the person would attack me. Never would I think of this to actually happen. Well, until I felt something on the back of my head. Hitting me hard. I went furious. I turned around and attacked the guy. My mind was just full of anger towards this stranger who, what I thought, hit me. We were wrestling until I fell on the ground. He was sitting on top of me, strangling me. I tried to crawl my nails into his eyes as deep as I could, but I started to black out. Suddenly there was this tuft in my head, wake up, or you will die. Well, adrenaline kicked in again and I opened my eyes and screamed at the top of my lungs. Attacking him again. That helped. He stood up and began to run. I laid there for a few seconds. Then I started to run home. Still screaming. My mom was already at our door and opened for me because my screams woke her up, or her mother's senses. Who knows? She immediately called the cops and they could arrest him on the same night. I know that's a wild story. I have some Swiss newspaper articles as a source if someone cares though. That's a hell of a tale. Glad you're okay now. Sources would be interesting. But that's just a morbid curiosity talking TBH. Thanks. I am too. Sure. No problem. I get that. Here's one of a few sources. It's in German though. Blick ch link. Sophomore year of college, went with a friend to go hang out at his old college. We were supposed to crash with a few friends of his, but we met a few ladies and ended up at a pool party. Next day went home and my friend started getting calls from one of his buddies' moms asking if he'd seen him. Turns out in the middle of the night a few guys broke into the house, kidnapped my friend's buddy and roommate. Took their car and drove them out to the middle of nowhere and executed them. I guess it was part of some gang initiation. I was supposed to sleep there with my friend. I still sometimes think about it and get the shivers. Edit. Spelling. This happened in 1999 in Steubenville, Ohio. Someone posted a link to the wiki page in the comments. Thank you to all the people who commented. I posted this before work and then my phone went crazy for the next few HRS. I can't help but imagine the sheer terror that these two friends went through at the end of their lives. Nobody deserves this. Bless their souls. Yeah, just reading that I automatically pictured being ferried to the middle of nowhere knowing you're about to die. Probably one of the worst ways to go. I was exiting a bar once after last call and was with a friend who was a medic. We saw a girl laying in a snowbank near a telephone pole who had just been hit by a car. We ran over and tried to help her. Some others were already on the phone with 911 and I, not having any medical training, didn't have anything to contribute but didn't want to just leave. The whole situation was concerning. I turn around for a second and start to hear people screaming. I turn around, a minivan was heading for us. The few people around this woman, they already started to run. But I was too late. He hit me as I was trying to flee. Put the car in reverse. Ran over me again. And then went forward and ran over me a third time. Turns out the guy was high and drunk and got into a fight with the women's BF, whom I bear a strong resemblance to. He thought I was him. Not to throw a pity party for myself, but 9 years later I have a ton of medical issues. And my life pretty much started on a downward spiral since then. But sure, I guess I survived. Edit. For everyone wondering about the guy, an off-duty cop watched the whole thing go down and copied his license plate number. He was apprehended 20 minutes later and charged with attempted murder, along with many other things. Man, I'm really sorry that happened to you. Hope you're doing better now. Thanks, man. Not really. And as I get older, I'm 33 now, I'm assuming everything is just going to get worse. I do realize how doom and gloomy that sounds though. Just a real concern I have. I was 14 and outside in my garage petting my cat. It was November, so it was already dark by 5 PM. Someone opened the door behind me without me hearing, grabbed me by my ponytail and starting dragging me outside. They hit me on my head with a brick and knocked me out. Pulled me halfway around my house when, I'm guessing this is when, they stabbed me on the left side of my stomach. This must have brought me out of my daze, because my mom said she heard me scream from inside where she and my brother and sister were in the kitchen. They came out the front door and saw me bleeding out on the sidewalk. Called 911. Had 12 stitches, double layer, a severe concussion, and whiplash. Didn't eat and hardly slept for a week. They never found them. Edit. Somehow believed for nearly 14 years I was 15 when this happened. Turns out I was 14. Edited to correct. Second edit. Thank you so much for my first gold. Horrid. So glad you survived. Thank you. Me too. I'm 27 now. Feels like a different life. Well, my mom got mad at me when I was 20 and I didn't give her money for her birthday, which I'm assuming was to pay off drug dealers of hers. So she stabbed me between the ribs. Ended up getting stuck in the bone and had to get it taken out in surgery. Did you post this on r/intitledparents a while back? Because I remember seeing a story like this. That was me. Yes. That's ducked up that the adults didn't believe you. That seems to be a common theme in this thread. People are so dumb it infuriates me. I was riding in a train across Eastern Europe. I was running low on money, and even though I had been warned that a woman should not travel alone in second class seating, I did not spring for first class. I was sitting alone in one of the compartments that seats 6. This was also a mistake and a very stupid one to sit alone. Eventually the train stopped and a man got on. He was very drunk. He came into my compartment and I guess thought I looked like his ex-wife. He attacked me. If it were not for the fact that this particular station was the border between two countries, I would be dead. Instead, border patrol from both countries were on the train, and while I was unable to scream, the door was open and at least a half a dozen uniformed men jumped him and saved me. I was in the hospital for a little while but recovered. At one point during the trial, one of the cops asked me if I wanted him and his buddies to hold the guy down while I hit him. I thought he was joking, so I said no. Go ahead, you do it. I was also joking. But it turns out they took it seriously and were about to. I did put a stop to that at least. But they were so offended that someone from their country would attack a young female American tourist. They were furious with him. So many people there depended upon tourism. But it turns out they took it seriously and were about to. I grew up in Ukraine. That guy probably got beat up later, lol. No doubt. He got his ass kicked as soon as the trial was over. This all happened many years ago. I was a lead man at a factory. A girl starts working there, and I take an interest. After a few months, I find out she is in a terrible drug-fueled abusive relationship. Every night, I tell her to call me. I'll come get her. Finally, after months, she calls me. I come get her and take her to my house. The guy she was in the relationship with didn't take too kindly to me taking her away. He spends the next 2 years harassing and threatening us. A few months after she and I got married, we went out for a few drinks. Her ex just happened to be at the bar we went to. He apologized to us for the threats and harassment. We were sitting outside talking with a few other people. Next thing I know, I'm on my back on the ground with someone choking me. I try all I can to get them off of me. But being blindsided and them being on top of me, it wasn't easy. As I struggle to get free, everything goes black. Then I see the light at the end of the tunnel. In that moment I was certain that this was the end of me. I somehow managed to get a better hold of this person's head, and I yank them off of me. We run to the car and get away. A week or so later, my wife had been talking to everyone she thinks might know what happened. Turns out, her ex had paid 2 people $50 to kill me that night. Where do you live that $50 is enough for life in prison? Holy ducking shit. I hope you are doing okay. Also, thank you for helping her. I used to be in a similar place, and it's only people like you who can ever help. I'm happy for the two of you. Since you say you are married now. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for 3 videos a day.